Hey everybody, welcome back to Just Keep Parenting. Thank you for joining us today. Um, Thank you for thinking about parenting and maybe some things that we can do a little tweaking in and be able to be more appropriate, be better, do things a little differently, right? And so as we learn more about child development, that helps us figure it out, right? Not everybody is an early childhood educator, and so as we learn more about children, we're better able to help them, right? And so we've been learning out of the book called Easy to Love, Difficult to Discipline, the 7 Basic Skills for Turning Conflict into Cooperation. We're on chapter 10 we're starting into chapter 10 this week. And chapter 10 is called Why Children Do What They Do. The development of misbehavior. And we've mentioned this in past videos, that misbehavior is a part of children's development, even though it irritates us, even though it's annoying, but it is a very natural part of development. And I think that we should be able to kind of take a deep breath when we recognize that misbehavior is natural. However, there are things that we do as adults in children's lives that cause more misbehavior than is natural, okay? So I love how Dr. Bailey states it in the book. She said, misbehavior, although annoying, is part of the normal development process children undergo, right? So, and the thing that I think is so important here, my friends, is that our responses to these unavoidable but necessary behaviors teach our children how to view themselves, how to view the world, and how to maintain relationships, right? So as we do the dance, I call it the misbehavior dance, right? As we do that dance with our children, then they're learning things, right? They're learning how to view themselves, how to view the world, and how to maintain relationships. And I think those are all really important things in today's society. So the first thing that we have to remember is that knowledge is power, right? The knowledge that we bring, the knowledge that we read, the knowledge that we see, it brings power to our life, right? And so we're reading child development books, we're talking to our neighbors, we're watching videos, we're, listening to podcasts about child development, right? And so recognizing that when we read those books, I have hundreds of child development books for reference, right? When parents come in with questions, when teachers come in with questions. But the problem with that is that general information never shows you the whole picture, right? And so we have to recognize that children are both alike and different from each other, right? One of the things that we work with in the National Association for the Education of Young Children, I refer to it as NAEYC. One of the things that we know about young children is the core considerations, we call them, and that is that all children develop fairly naturally, but all children also develop individually, and all children develop according to context, right? And so as we look at this, we look at this general information. It's like, oh no, that's not my child. Oh yeah, that is my child to a T, right? So we have to remember that some of that information is going to hit home and some of it doesn't. So we just use what we can, right? According to that second piece, which is that individual development of children. So we gain power, right? We read books, we listen to podcasts, we watch vlogs, all those different things. But the thing that is most important, my friends, there's a great quote in the chapter this week, and it says, conflict is an indicator of growth trying to happen. Think about what that means in your life, in your family's life, in the world, in our city, in our school, right? Conflict is an indicator of growth trying to happen, right? And so this growth, right? Growth is probably going to happen, but where do we want that growth to go, right? And that conflict is kind of that beginning. So our response to conflict, right, can yield constructive, growth-enhancing effects, or on the other hand, it can yield destructive, deadening effects that trap us and our child in endless power struggles, right? So if you're in some power struggles, if you find yourself in power struggles quite often, we have to step back, right? We have to step back and say, wait a minute. I know that conflict is a part of children's growth, right? It's a part of their development. So how am I approaching this, right? Am I approaching it with constructive, growth enhancing abilities or the opposite? Right? So take some time to kind of look at that, because we're all going to be in power struggles, right? How we deal with those power struggles is what's going to help us and help our children. So we know that they always arise, conflicts do, and they always serve a purpose. Isn't that interesting? When I was thinking about that, I thought, you bet. I'm thinking about the conflicts that I've had recently with friends. I'm thinking about the conflicts that I've had with coworkers. I'm thinking about the conflicts that I've had with people on the street, driving their cars, right? They serve a purpose. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to use, we've talked about the 7 powers, right? In this book and in the vlogs. We have to use that power of acceptance. I can't change this right now. I can't change right now what's happening. So I have to accept it, right? We breathe and we use our energy wisely instead of frantically trying to prevent the conflict. I can't prevent it, but I can help my child, I can help myself work through the conflict, right? Given skills that I'm using, right? So one of the things that we have to recognize is that behind behavior lies development. So we look at all the cute things that children do, right? This week I had one totally right in front of my face. I was visiting with a colleague of mine here in the office, and she used to be one of my students, I don't know, 12 years ago. And she's working for us this summer. And then outside in the hallway, there was this little boy that just kind of kept walking back and forth. And I hadn't really paid him any attention. And then I heard him say, Dory, and I thought, oh my gosh, I know this kid. So I looked over there, and it was my friend Sam. And his mom was here as well, getting some teaching supplies. She's going to go back into teaching this year. And he said, I wonder what you're doing. And I said, well, right now I'm visiting with one of my teaching buddies. And he's like, oh, do I know her? I said, well, come in. So he came in the office, didn't recognize her. And I said, so what can I do for you, Sam? And he looked at me and he said, I'm just wondering if you have a sucker. He's been to my office before. I said, I do. I think I have one sucker left. I keep all the Valentine candy in my desk. And as kids come by, sometimes they know about that. And I said, yeah, I have a sucker right here that has your name on it. So I pull out the sucker, not knowing it's a cinnamon sucker from, you know, that chocolate place. Anyway, I can't think of the name right now. But, and he opens it and he said, I don't see my name on this story. So then I had to rewind, right? And I had to say again, oh, you know what, Sam? I used that kind of in a silly way, didn't I? When you asked if I had a sucker, my brain said, yeah, I have one sucker left. So all I said was, it's your name on it because I only have one sucker left, so it's yours. You were thinking that I'd written your name on it, didn't you? And he said, yeah. And so we had this little moment of understanding, right? I understood that that cute thing that he did was part of his development, because children at that age are so literal, right? Becky, in her book, she talks about a story where she, in the grocery store, right? The kids are in the basket and they're touching everything. I still touch things when I go to stores. It's like, oh, how does that feel? I'm very sensory with that, right? And nobody's there to tell me not to stop touching it. But the parents will say, don't touch that, right? Whether it's a can of soup. And so the child is thinking, oh, I shouldn't touch that can of soup. The parent is using that as anything, right? Don't touch anything in the store. But the child, because they're literal thinkers, are saying, that can of soup, I'm not supposed to touch that can of soup. All right. They get onto the packages of Cheetos, and they're touching the packages of Cheetos. I told you not to touch that. No, you didn't. You told me not to touch the can of soup, right? And so there again, it's these the developmental factors, right, that frustrate us as adults in children's lives because we're not looking at it through their lens. We're looking at it through our lens, and we have way more experience, right? We have way more Rolodexy things, right? We have way more files in our brain. We have way more cup hooks in our brain because of our experience that they don't have yet. I love when Becky says in here about the little boy marches around singing his version of the television jingle. The best part of waking up is soldiers in your cup, right? Children use their own life experiences to make meaning for new experiences, right? So they're adding it to that little cup hook there. A child knows more about soldiers than coffee, Folgers. So when he hears the jingle, he constructs his own meaning. Adults too add personal meaning to their perceptions, but adults have so many more experiences upon which to draw that the meaning they add is likely to be quite similar to the one other adults impose, right? So it's that experience that we've had that sometimes makes it hard for us to remember where the child is coming from. Soldiers or Folgers, you know? And we see this all the time as children are using new vocabulary, right? Sometimes they just make me laugh. And I'll say to them in the classroom, oh, I know, you heard the jingle, Folgers in your cup. Do you know what Folgers is? No. Well, Folgers is a type of coffee, right? And so some people, when they wake up in the morning, they like to have a cup of coffee. And that coffee, that brand is called Folgers. And it rhymes with soldiers, right? And that's why you thought it said soldiers. And so having those moments of teaching, those moments of guiding, right? When you hear those cute things, when you hear what might not be so cute, right? What might be conflict. But in reality, both of them are conflict. We're just looking at them differently because some of them are cute and some of them are annoying, right? So we have to understand development, right? In order to offer children loving guidance rather than opportunities to disconnect and defend. That's what we do. Right? If something comes up against us, what do we do as adults? We go to the brainstem and we defend ourselves, right? We put up that wall. And that's what the children are doing if the connection isn't there. But if we've made those connections, right, then they don't defend as much, right? So when we speak to children in terms they cannot understand, right? Folgers, sucker with your name on it, right? They can't respond appropriately. Then they create this feeling of, I'm not good enough, right? Because I don't know how to respond. I didn't respond to the way you wanted me to, right? So when that's felt, right, it prevents us from feeling connected to each other. And we feel that as adults too. Sometimes you're like, what did I just say? I don't. And then all of a sudden, right, we start to feel disconnected. We start to feel we don't have the confidence that we had, right? And we have that experience, but those kids don't have that experience yet. So when children feel disconnected, they choose to be defensive rather than cooperative, right? So our job is to help them feel connected rather than disconnected. So as we have those conversations, right, and we can say, oh, Sam, that was so cute. Let me tell you what I meant to say, right? And that way you can understand it because you said, you know, you have a name on my sucker. The other thing that Becky does is she talks about how the children just scrutinize every verbal and nonverbal action, right? They're looking to make patterns because they're pattern-seeking people. We all are, but they are mostly because they don't have any experience. So any experience that they have, they're trying to seek that pattern. So that's why they connect it, right, to that. And our job is to help connect with them and help them connect better with the world. So as you think about your conversations with children this week, hopefully you'll think about, this conflict is typical, right? And how can I work through it rather than to bust into it to create that feeling of not being good enough. Just keep parenting, everybody. It's great to have you join us. Feel free to share it if you think that somebody could benefit from it. And we'll see you back next week.